Thank you. Please be seated, everyone. Before we commence, ladies and gentlemen, I will ask, as I must, whether anyone was exposed to intentionally or unintentionally or engaged in conversations or overheard conversations or any discussions about this case while you were outside of the courtroom for our lunch break. I see no hands. Thanks very much. Well, we will resume with the state's case in chief, Attorney Raymond.
Yes, we're going to call Detective Sabrina Sims for a limited purpose.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes.
And with the both case detectives, if you return to the stands, if you're still able and willing to testify without a mask, I won't engage in the question with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Detective Sims, I assume your name is still spelled the same as yesterday?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So we won't go through that again. In the course of this investigation, were various warrants and subpoenas written?
Yes, they were.
And what is the purpose of a warrant or a subpoena?
Depending on the type, we're looking for records from companies or businesses. For example, cell phone companies, medical records, things of that sort.
Okay. Basically telling them they have to turn over whatever you wrote the subpoena for.
That's correct.
Okay. And were such records written to local healthcare and hospitals in the area?
Yes,
Okay. Specifically for the defendant's records?
that's correct.
Okay. I'm going to show you what has been marked as Exhibit 494. What is Exhibit 494?
It is a subpoena and return for the UW health records of Chandler Halderson.
And does that appear to be a true and accurate copy of that subpoena?
Yes, it does.
At this time, I would move Exhibit 494 into evidence.
Any objection?
None.
It is received.
And of course, a lot of it is just legal mumbo jumbo, but I have noted with a pink tab there, a paragraph. It's on page 1347 of Discovery for Counsel. Would you just read to the jury this paragraph, what specifically UW Health was court-ordered to provide your office with?
Sure. Certified copies of medical records pertaining to Chandler M. Halderson, male white, date of birth 3/15/1998. More specifically, a complete copy of the official medical records to include outpatient notes, all discharge summaries, all pathology reports, and all clinic summaries, X-ray, EKG, and lab reports collected and created by UW Health pertaining to the Halderson's examination on or around June 17th, 2021, and any follow-up treatment as a result of a head injury.
All right. So you asked for the records for that day that he went into the ER, but also for any follow-up appointments.
That's correct.
Did you receive records from UW Health for the day he was seen at the ER?
Yes, we did.
Did you receive any records for any follow-up appointments?
We did not.
Okay. But they were court-ordered to provide them had any follow-up appointments occurred?
That's correct.
I'm now going to show you what has been marked as Exhibits 492 and 493. What are those two exhibits? What is 492 first?
492 is a document from UW Health, including a certification of medical records from CIOX Health, and it is the health records from UW in regards to patient Chandler M. Halderson for treatment he received on June 17th, 2021.
And does that appear to be a true and accurate copy of what you received from UW Health in response to your court order?
Yes, it does.
And what is document 493?
493 is a CIOX Health certification of medical records for Chandler Halderson, certifying the records that we received. CIOX Health is a records management company that manages the records for UW.
So they are the ones who receive the subpoenas and they output or answer the subpoenas and send you the court-ordered records.
That's correct.
At this time, I would move exhibits 493 and 492 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
They are received.
And I'm, of course, not going to put these on the overhead because they're very small print, but I am going to ask on page 1207 or page 10 of the medical records, I'm going to ask that you just read this paragraph for the jury.
And which exhibit number
I'm sorry,
is
that is on 492.
Thank you.
Sure. On arrival, the patient presented as above and was promptly evaluated by this provider. VS, Victor Sam, were reviewed, which were reassuring. Exam notable for midline C2, C3 tenderness to palpation. Patient was promptly provided a cervical collar. Obtain CT, head and CT cervical spine, both of which were negative. Given the patient remains with midline cervical spine tenderness, palpation was placed in a PMT, Paul, Mary, Tom, collar. Patient likely suffered a mild concussion. We did discuss signs or symptoms that would warrant immediate return to the emergency department, for which patient verbalized understanding. Patient was provided concussion protocol for home, in addition to prescription for Zofran for nausea. Patient and patient's father were in agreement with treatment plan, was subsequently discharged home, stable condition with neurosurgical follow-up in 4 to 6 weeks for repeat evaluation of his cervical spine.
All right. I have no further questions for this witness at this time.
Cross-examination?
Detective Sims, as far as a subpoena goes, that was directly to UW Hospital, correct?
Can I look at the document again? It was UW Health. There's just multiple hospitals, UW hospitals and clinics.
And let me ask a better question.
Sure.
No other subpoenas to any other hospitals in Madison were sent out, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any redirect?
No.
Detective, thank you. You may return to your seat.
State calls Dr. Lohmeier to the stand. Just want to go to the gentleman in the gray jacket.
Do you solemnly swear affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
I take it from your title, you work in healthcare. If your preference is, and if you believe you should remain masked while testifying, I have no problem with that. If you believe you can safely and responsibly not wear your mask and testify, I leave you that choice.
Yes, sir. I'm comfortable removing it if that's the court's preference.
That is the preference, and that would be wonderful. Thank you.
I'm also going to ask that you move that mic a little closer.
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Could you please state both your first and last name and spell them for the record?
Absolutely. My name is Michael, M-I-C-H-A-E-L, Lohmeier, L-O-H-M-E-I-E-R.
How are you employed?
I'm an emergency physician at the University of Wisconsin Hospital and Clinics.
Were you employed as such in June of 2021?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're an ER physician, so you have a MD?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay. And I assume as an ER physician, you see lots of patients.
Yes, that's correct.
And I assume you do not remember all the details of every visit.
Unfortunately, no.
Okay. So I believe it might even still be up there. No. Are they at the table? Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. So doctor, would it assist you to have a certified medical record of the visit with the patient we're going to discuss today in order to testify?
Yes, thank you.
And I'm also going to show you what has been marked as Exhibit 491. How would you identify Exhibit 491?
This looks like my CV, my curriculum vitae.
All right, and for people that aren't in the science or academia, is that a fancy way to say resume?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay. And that includes all your training,
That's
including
correct.
where you went to med school, other trainings you have participated in.
That's correct.
Move Exhibit 491 into evidence at this time.
Any objection?
No objection.
It is received.
So on June 17th of 2021, did you in fact see a patient named Chandler Halderson?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Do you have any independent, before you look at the certified medical record, do you have any independent recollection of that visit?
Prior to being contacted by the subpoena, I did not have any recollection of the visit, no.
Okay, so feel free to review and to look at the certified medical record. I think it's helpful for the court just to know if you're looking at the record when you are.
Sure.
So do you know about what time of day you saw Mr. Halderson on June 17th?
I believe it was around noon.
Okay. And what symptoms did he report, or where did he report to?
I don't think I understand. Where did he
Sure,
report?
I'm sorry. You work for the UW system. There's more than one UW hospital in
Yes, ma'am.
Madison, right?
Yes. That day, I was working out at the emergency department at the UW hospital at the American Center, also known as TAC.
Okay, and that's way out on the east side.
East side, correct.
And did Mr. Halderson present there in the ER?
Yes, that's correct. He self-presented.
Okay, and had you met him before this day?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. What symptoms did he present with?
I believe he was complaining of some pain to his head and his right ribs after a reported fall down some stairs.
So what did you do in your treatment?
In the emergency department, we have an attending physician who's responsible for all patients that present to the ED. We also have a team of physician assistants who we work with. At that time, my physician assistant went and evaluated the patient first. He came up with a treatment plan. We discussed it. I evaluated the patient afterwards and agreed on the plan, and then got some imaging.
Okay. What imaging did you get?
We got a CT scan, a CAT scan of his head and his C-spine, his cervical spine.
And what, if anything, did that imaging reveal?
Those images were reported as being negative without abnormality.
Did you perform any other tests?
So he had a physical exam during which the PA and I both did an abbreviated physical exam looking for any signs of injury. We did discuss with the patient a potential x-ray of his ribs because he was having some right-sided chest tenderness. At that time, the patient declined the additional imaging, and I think at about that time, we closed the encounter.
Did you run any other sort of tests, such as blood tests or anything like that?
I would need to refer back. I don't recall.
Yeah, and I didn't mean that as a trick question in any way.
Yes, ma'am. This looks different than the one we usually have. Typically, we will get some screening blood work on patients as well. I don't have that information in the front of my mind. I'll have to review here quickly.
Well, actually, let me just ask perhaps a more precise question. When somebody comes in and self-reports a fall, maybe has some bruising, is there any test that you can do to determine, yes, they have a concussion?
No, ma'am. Unfortunately, a concussion is a clinical diagnosis. It's usually a rule out by testing for other conditions such as skull fractures, bleeding around the brain, things of that nature. When we don't find those, there's not really a good blood test or an imaging test that definitively diagnoses a concussion.
So if I showed up in your ER today and told you, I fell, my head hurts, I hit my head, would I be diagnosed with a concussion?
A head injury alone is typically not enough to get a diagnosis of concussion. Usually there are some symptoms that go along with it. I have photophobia, so bright lights bother me, loud noises bother me. Looking at a computer screen or a television is difficult. Sometimes people will complain of difficulty concentrating, nausea, some of those symptoms. So generally, it is the combination of a head strike with some other clinical symptoms or complaints that will give a diagnosis of a concussion.
And those symptoms, again, are self-report symptoms.
That's correct.
They're not symptoms that you can actually look at cells or look at imaging and say, yep, you have nausea.
That's correct.
Okay. And what was after you did the imaging, what was sort of the take-home plan or continued care plan for Mr. Halderson?
The take-home plan was conservative management. So we generally have patients with mild to moderate concussions managed with Tylenol, ibuprofen, over-the-counter meds. Occasionally, we'll give a prescription for an antiemetic or an anti-nausea medication so that they can drink plenty of fluids and stay well hydrated. I believe for this case, the patient had some residual neck pain, so he was given a collar to go home with for support with instruction to follow up with his primary care physician and with the spine team that was on call.
Is it unusual for you to hand out a neck brace or a neck collar with somebody who says, hey, my neck is hurting?
No, ma'am. It is not unusual at all.
Okay. And you said diagnosis of a mild or moderate concussion. What, in this case, did you diagnose Mr. Halderson with?
I believe he was diagnosed as having a mild concussion, and I believe in the notes it reported him as having just a CHI, a closed head injury, so a nonspecific diagnosis.
Did you, in his presentation to you, did he state whether or not he had taken anything for the pain he was experiencing?
I do not recall that information off the top of my head. I would have to review the notes.
Do you mind reviewing the notes?
Sure. So I do not have that information in my addendum at the bottom. He may have reported that information to either the nurse or the PA who saw him, but I did not personally take any of that information.
Okay, thank you. And you said you had provided a neck collar. What instructions, if any, did you give him concerning that neck collar?
Yes, ma'am. So when we have someone with persistent pain but negative imaging, they go home with what's called a PMT collar. It's a soft collar that gives support to the head and the neck. And in general, they're instructed to follow up with their primary care physician and a spine physician if they're continuing to have pain or symptoms, generally in the 4 to 6 week period. I will say that many times patients have improvement of their symptoms before, so they'll self-remove their collars and they may or may not present later for follow-up.
At any point, did you give Mr. Halderson directions that he had to wear it for a certain amount of time?
I did not specifically give him that information, no.
Okay. At any point in time during your visit with Mr. Halderson, did you tell him he was going to experience paralysis?
No, ma'am.
At any point during your time with Mr. Halderson, did you tell him that he had a brain bleed?
No, ma'am.
At any point during your appointment with Mr. Halderson, did you at any point tell him that he had a brain aneurysm?
No, ma'am.
At any point, did you tell him that he had nerve damage?
I don't believe so. No, ma'am.
At any point, did you tell him he had a spinal injury?
No, I don't believe so.
At any point, did you advise him that he should not fly in an airplane?
No, ma'am.
At any point, did you tell him that he should not drive?
I don't believe so. No.
At any point, did you ever say that he shouldn't drive long distances?
No, ma'am.
At any point, did you tell him that he had a hematoma in his brain?
No, ma'am, I did not.
At any point, did you tell him that he would have an inability to use his legs in a normal manner?
No, ma'am.
At any point, did you tell him because of his mild concussion that he was going to have a colostomy bag?
No, ma'am.
And just to be clear, that's a bag for poop.
That's correct.
At any point in time, did you have to drill a hole into his head?
No, ma'am.
At any point in time, did you tell him that he was going to have surgery where a hole would be drilled in his head?
No, ma'am.
No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Thank you. Good afternoon, doctor.
Hello.
I don't have a lapel mic, so I'm just going to stay seated, if that's okay with you.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, you did diagnose Chandler Halderson with a mild concussion, right?
That's correct.
And you can diagnose someone with a concussion even though the imaging didn't show any abnormalities, correct?
That's correct.
When you diagnose someone with a concussion close in time to when the injury or the hit to the brain happens, symptoms can either improve or get worse after that moment in time, correct?
That's correct.
So when they leave the ER, sometimes people get better, sometimes people experience ongoing or more symptoms, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And when Mr. Halderson was leaving the ER, he was given a sheet of instructions of things to watch for, correct?
I believe so, yes.
On that sheet would have been things such as blurred vision, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Increasing pain in the head, increasing headaches, correct?
Yes.
Weakness in his extremities, correct?
Yes.
And you wouldn't know whether these things actually happened or not unless the patient reports back to you, correct?
That is correct.
But he would be told to be on alert for these things if they happened, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And to generally rest and avoid stimulation in order to improve his concussion symptoms, correct?
That is correct.
Things like avoid bright lights, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Screens,
Yes.
video games, things like that, correct?
That's correct.
And really, one of the treatments for a concussion is just to sit in a, darkened room and really not do anything with your brain, correct?
Rest is generally one of the recommendations, yes.
Now, as a result of his visit, you did prescribe him some medication, correct?
That is correct.
For nausea?
Yes.
And what was that?
It's a medication called ondansetron. It's also known as Zofran. It's an anti-nausea medication.
He had reported feeling like he was going to throw up, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And that's why you would prescribe him that medication.
Yes, ma'am. It's also to help prevent dehydration. So sometimes people will get dehydrated, their headache will get worse. And so we like them to stay hydrated. So sometimes it's a preventative measure as well.
And just to be clear, when someone reports that they have a headache, as Ms. Raymond asked you, there's no test, blood test or something like that, that can confirm what the person is telling you, right?
I don't believe so, no.
Now, when he presented in the ER that day, wanted to ask you what this means. patient remains with midline cervical spine tenderness palpation. What do those words mean?
So as part of the physical exam, when we are examining a patient, we will actually press on the spinous process over the middle of their neck. He had tenderness on presentation, which was a big part of the reason why we got the CT scan to begin with. And on reassessment after the negative imaging, we reassessed the patient. He still had persistent pain in the midline there, which is not a direct indicator of an injury, but it does say we should keep the collar on for safety.
And when he left with the collar that day, you testified that there was no set time he was supposed to wear the collar, or you didn't give him a set number of days to wear the collar. Is that right?
I don't believe so, no. The instructions were to follow up with his primary care physician and with our spine doctor.
And that was in 4 to 6 weeks?
Generally, that's the time frame that they recommend. I can't recall specifically for this case, but I generally encourage patients to call if they're continuing to have any symptoms after they go home.
That's it, thank you.
Redirect.
Just a couple quick questions. Doctor, with self-report symptoms such as nausea or headache, is the information you receive from the patient only as good as the accuracy or honesty of that information?
I'm not sure that I totally follow the question.
Sure. If a patient lies to you and says, my arm hurts or my head hurts, is that information useful to you if it is in fact a lie?
I tend to take my patients at their word. I think that if I get into trying to second guess them, it gets to be, my job gets too complicated. So when patients present symptoms, I generally take them, unless I have something to prove or disprove, I take them at their word.
Sure. But my question is not how you interpret the information. As far as scientifically or medically accurate, is it only valuable in as much as it is true?
Yes, I assume that it's true, and that's how it's medically relevant.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
May the doctor be excused and released?
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you.
You're excused from your subpoena and released from the same. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The state calls Kathryn Mellinger.
Oh, I'll take those. Thank you.
Hey. You're going to go with that gentleman in the gray coat right there. Doctor? Take it.
Do you solemnly swear affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Thank you. Good morning. Well, good afternoon, sorry. Ms. Mellender, first, let me ask you, because I was preoccupied, I didn't hear, did you verbally answer yes to the oath?
Yes.
Thank you. Secondly, are you in a position where you believe you can safely and responsibly testify without wearing a mask?
No.
You need to wear your mask in order to believe you can protect yourself from the virus and
Yes.
safety concerns. All right, then I won't force you to take off your mask if you believe that is true.
Thank you.
All right.
You work in the healthcare field, do you not?
I do.
Okay.
Okay.
Could you please state and spell your name for us?
Kathryn Mellender, Cathryn, Mellender, Mellender.
And
Ask you to grab the base of the microphone and pull it really close, because the fans are on. That creates a level of noise. Your voice is on the softer side, and you have a mask, so
Okay.
being up really close to it will make sure we can all hear. Thank you. Go right ahead.
you go by Kat, correct?
Correct.
Can I call you Kat today?
Yes, please.
Okay. Kat, how old are you?
I'm 21 years of age.
And do you live here in the Madison area?
I do live in the Madison area.
Okay. And do you know someone named Chandler Halderson?
I do.
How do you know Chandler?
We were in a relationship.
Okay. At this point, something's going to happen. The judge is going to ask everyone out here to lower their mask, and I'm going to ask you if you see Chandler in the courtroom. It's one of the strange things we're going to do. So the judge will go.
Don't say anything until everybody has remasked. If everyone can lower their masks for a count of 3, 1, everybody within the courtroom except in the jury box. 1, 2, 3, replace your masks.
Is Chandler in the room here today?
Yes.
Can you tell me where he's sitting and describe what he's wearing?
He's over there with a blue tie and a blazer.
I'd ask the record to reflect identification of the defendant.
It shall, thank you.
When did you first begin your relationship with Chandler?
In August 2019.
And how did you meet?
We met through a friend.
What was Chandler, what was going on in his life when you first met? What was he doing with his life?
He was attending college. He was living at home and preparing to move into an apartment. Dog sitting quite often.
And where were you in life? What were you up to when you first met back in 2019?
When I first met Chandler, I was going to school as well, part of Student Senate, doing shows in the theater department.
What types of things did you and Chandler do in your relationship? Did you go on a lot of dates together?
Yeah, we would grab dinners, have movie dates, just sit at home and watch movies, go on walks quite often, play with the dogs. That was a big thing. We loved playing Frisbee with the dogs. Start shows together.
Sure. Around 2019 and 2020, and then obviously into this year a little bit, or into last year, 2021, how would you and Chandler communicate with each other? Just by calling each other, or were there other things too?
We would talk on Snapchat, text, FaceTime, and call quite often.
Okay. Would you also, so it's text, Snapchat, call, FaceTime? Mm-hmm. Would sometimes you start communicating about a subject on one and then switch to another and then switch back?
Yes.
Fair to say you communicated or you texted a lot with Chandler.
Yes.
And you've seen in this case, probably at some point, printouts of even just a couple of days of your text messages, which are hundreds of pages long, right?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have any sort of relationship with Chandler's family?
Yes.
Let's start with his brother, Mitchell. Did you know Mitchell?
I did know Mitchell.
Tell me about your relationship with Mitchell.
I would hang out with him at the family events, be it like a dinner or for the holidays. We had a game night at his home once with Caitlin and Chandler and myself. Usually see him during family events.
What about, let's start with Bart. Did you have a relationship, or how did you know Bart Halderson?
I knew Mr. Halderson through Chandler. I would be at their home quite often, and he would show me fishing tips, or if I was cooking, him and Mrs. Halderson would be in the kitchen, and we would have game nights quite often. And we would also play Mario Kart together a lot.
Okay.
I have a handkerchief.
What about Krista? Could you tell me about your relationship with Krista Halderson?
Mrs. Halderson and I, we would text often about what we're doing in our lives and talk about the dogs and Chandler, and we would talk about recipes and food we want to try, and if I was cooking them something from my culture, she would always be excited, and we talk about it and always talk about game nights and wanting to do a girls' trip to Disneyland together with her, I, and Caitlin.
You texted often with Miss Halderson?
Yes, I did.
Positive relationship, a good relationship?
Yeah,
Did you like her?
I did like Miss Halderson a lot.
Did you like Mr. Halderson?
Yes, I did.
You were over at the Halderson home quite a bit?
Very often, yes.
And that's over in Windsor, Oak Springs Circle?
Yes.
I'm going to object to leading.
I'm sorry, I didn't use my phone.
That's fine. I'll, sure. Whereabouts?
Leading questions.
We'll withdraw the question and I'll ask it again. Whereabouts did the Haldersons live?
They lived in Windsor, past that big church. I don't know the road of it, but it was past a big church, right by a pond.
When you were over at the house, did you mostly stick in one spot, or did you kind of treat it like your own home, go wherever you needed to go?
I would go wherever I needed to go within reason.
Back in June of this year, just before maybe everything that we're going to talk about happened, were you over at the Halderson home and had an occasion to maybe go in the basement?
Yes.
Why did you go in the basement while you were over there?
I went into the basement to grab ice cream and soda to make root beer floats with Mr. and Mrs. Halderson and Chandler.
And this is sometime in, when is it?
June.
Okay. And why were you going to the basement to grab those items? Where were they were in the basement?
They were in the basement in the freezer.
Okay. The Haldersons had a freezer in the basement?
Two.
There's leading questions going on.
I'll sustain. Go ahead and phrase carefully.
Tell me about what freezers the Haldersons had.
They had a chest freezer and then a tall one, kind of like a fridge, but it was just a freezer.
Okay. And did you have an occasion ever to go in the chest freezer?
Yes.
And what types of things were in there?
Mostly fish, specifically salmon, veggies. Sometimes they'd keep ice bags in there.
Was it full?
Yes.
The other freezer, did you have occasions to go in that on occasion?
Just once.
Okay. And was it being used in full?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a screen on in front of you right now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to show you Exhibit 21 has been received into evidence in this case. I think we went too far, Judge. There was a happy medium there in a second.
Well, that's what we discussed. Is the Elmo on? It's the one.
There we go. There's a little bit of a glare on that, but is that look to be the Halderson's basement or something else?
Yes, it's the Halderson basement.
And that chest freezer that's open right there, is that the chest freezer that you had been in previously?
Yes.
And was it full when you saw it in June?
Yes.
Was it sitting like that open when you saw it last?
No.
Okay. Was it in that general location when you saw it last?
Yes.
In your relationship with Chandler, was there a lot of discussion about money?
Yes.
Was it important to you that whoever you were dating have a job or going to school or something?
Yes.
Can you tell me why that would be important?
Just think being self-sufficient.
Okay.
It's either in school or working.
Okay. As far as you knew, in 2020 and this year even, 2021, let's say the spring of last year, was Chandler going to school?
Yes.
Did he talk about that with you?
Yes.
What did you know about where Chandler was going to school and what he was doing?
He was taking classes online through MITC for UW, and it was for an IT degree.
Would Chandler talk a lot about school with you?
Often.
What kind of things would you talk about?
When we'd have tests or homework that we were doing.
Going in this year, did he ever show you any sort of like work he was doing for school, any projects, things like that?
He showed me some coding he was doing once.
For a class? You said he was going online. Did Chandler ever physically go there as far as you knew? For a class?
I don't remember.
This spring, going into the summer, prior to everything happening, did you believe Chandler was going to MATC?
Yes.
Did you ever see his grades? Did he ever share his grades with you or transcripts or anything like that?
No, he didn't show me.
Do you know how close he was to graduating?
One class away, I believed.
Did you and Chandler ever talk about him working with the police at all, with scuba diving or anything like that?
With the DNR.
Sure. Tell me about that.
He told me he would scuba dive for the DNR and then sometimes help out the police through the DNR.
Did he say what he would do for them, like specifically?
Scuba diving, look in the lakes for stuff.
Was this like a job or a volunteer thing? What was your understanding from Chandler?
I believe it was a job.
And did he have this throughout the time you were dating?
During the summer.
Were there ever times where Chandler would go to that job, as far as you knew, or need to schedule time to be there?
Yes.
How would that come up?
He would just tell me he had to be on call days and we couldn't hang out those days, or he would only have select time to hang out or else he'd be on call.
So there'd be times you couldn't hang out because he would say he was on call?
Mm-hmm.
How often would that come up in your relationship?
I don't remember.
Okay. But it came up?
It did.
Okay. Did you ever see Chandler with any sort of scuba diving equipment, oxygen tanks, those flippers that people put on, anything like that?
No.
Did you believe he worked at this dive team job back
Yes.
at that time?
Yes.
At some points in the past year and a half or so, did Chandler get a job with American Family Insurance?
Yes.
And what did Chandler tell you about that, or what did you know about what he was doing?
That it was an internship to help graduate through school, and he would be doing stuff with solar panels and laying up plans for companies, going through American Family and such.
So it was an internship. Was it eventually a job or something else, like where he got paid?
A paid internship, I believe.
Okay. Did he ever show you any of his work that he was working on?
He showed me a plan on a whiteboard that he was drawing up.
When you say a whiteboard, what do you mean by that?
Like a whiteboard that you hang up in your home or see in school.
Okay. And what was on that whiteboard that he was showing you, if you remember?
A building and where they wanted to place the solar panels and how it was by a highway, so it would be a safety hazard for the direction they want to point it in because of the angle of the sun could be blinding the drivers.
Okay. Did you seem excited about this project when he was talking to you about it?
Yes.
Okay. Did Chandler have any issues with pay at American Family Insurance and getting his paychecks?
Yes.
Tell me what you know about that from Chandler.
That there was something going on with who American Family would go through for payment, that the check went to the wrong address and then it had to be canceled, and then he tried setting up for direct deposit and something happened with that, and then the amount that they had to pay him was too much, so they didn't believe they owed someone that amount of money, and then it just wasn't getting to him.
Because of this issue or maybe others, were there times in your relationship where it didn't seem like Chandler had a lot of money?
Yes.
When you all went out to get food or something along those lines, would it be more common for you to pay or for him to pay, or how would that work?
For me to pay.
Yeah. Sure. 1 second. I'll tell you before. Yeah. You might not have some specific dates, and that's totally okay, but do you know approximately kind of the time period Chandler was working at American Family Insurance?
Believe January until the spring.
Okay. Kind of the same question as before with MATC when I asked you about transcripts. Regarding American Family Insurance, did you ever see any documents, pay stubs, contracts, HR stuff, anything with like the logo of American Family kind of around Chandler or in his bedroom or anything like that?
I did not.
And in that time period you were dating, 2020 and 2021, while he said he had this job, did you believe he was working at American Family Insurance?
Yes, I did.
Okay. At some point going into 2021, so just last year before the summer, did it appear that Chandler had gotten a new job or was in the process of getting a new job?
Yes.
And where was that job at?
The company or the
Yeah,
location?
what was the company?
SpaceX.
Okay. So what's going to happen now is the attorneys and I are going to talk to the judge for 1 second. So some weird white noise is going to come on. Be a good second to take a drink of water if you want, but it's going to be about 1 minute, okay?
Thank you.
How did you first learn that Chandler was going to work at SpaceX?
He mentioned it while we were on a call.
Did he have an interview?
Yes.
Okay. I want to show you what's been marked as this case, in this case as exhibits 506. But I want you to look at that for a second and just quickly, you'll notice we've redacted some things. You've seen this type of exhibit before, correct?
Correct.
And we've redacted your phone number out of this, have we not?
Yes.
Okay. Chandler's saved in your phone as kind of a name. What is that name?
Hubby.
And that's just something you would call him?
Yes.
Okay. But are these messages with Chandler and you, looks like back in May of this year?
Yes.
Okay. And what is the first one that Chandler says?
I have a good feeling about SpaceX.
Okay. I'll move 506 into evidence.
Any objection?
Subject to what was said on the record, no.
It is
They
received.
come on that screen, okay? So we're going to talk about some of them. Just real quick, because it's the first one that we're going to do that looks like this. Your phone was taken by the police and downloaded in the course of this investigation, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we're going to try to get the lighting just right, and that might be the trick right there. So in the blue here, that's Chandler, correct?
Correct.
I have a good feeling about SpaceX, and if we're looking at it, the date on these messages is down there. It's also right there, but this one I'll read out loud just because it's a bit hard to see. We're at the 23rd of May of 2020. You say, I'm proud of you. What does Chandler say there?
Thanks. I hope I get a job.
And you say, me too. In general, were you hoping Chandler got this job?
Yes.
Why?
He seemed excited about it. A lot of pay.
A lot of pay? Did Chandler ever tell you how much money he'd be making at SpaceX?
Around 800,000.
800,000?
Sorry, I apologize, 80,000.
80,000? Okay. So after you say, me too, we're still on the 23rd, he says, I'll be happy. And you respond, I'll be very happy for you too. You'll get the money you want, the job you want, right? You were happy for him.
Correct.
You talked a little bit, and we're going to flip through some of these that maybe aren't super relevant. As we talked about, you texted a lot. But you're talking about the location and the money, and Chandler says, can you read that one for us?
But I'll be happy with money.
And you say maybe they'll transfer you in a couple years. Was there any discussion about that around that time?
Yes.
And what was that discussion about? Maybe transferring or where this job was?
The job was in Florida.
Okay. And that would take you to Florida as well?
Correct.
Okay. Was it your intention to move with Chandler?
Yes.
And on May 24th, he sends you this message. What does it say?
I have a follow-up interview for Florida tomorrow.
And as that kind of approached, on the 25th now of May, you're saying, tell me, kind of in an exaggerated fashion, but just tell me what's going on?
Yes.
And what does Chandler say?
Shoot, sorry, I got the job.
And you say, congratulations. You have a discussion about the job in general, and eventually Chandler, the same day, the 25th, what does he say to you?
I have training next week over the computer, and I leave June 11th and start on June 14th.
You and Chandler discuss, perhaps, I think you said that you were going to move with him eventually, right?
Correct.
Was it going to be right away, or were you going to wait a couple weeks?
Wait a couple weeks.
Okay. And what does Chandler text you on the 25th?
I'll come back every other weekend, hon.
And what else?
And I can send you money till your lease is up and you move in with me.
The text messages that day end with Chandler sending you a couple messages. Can you read the first one?
If you're positive you want to be with me for the long run.
Was that in relation to you moving with him?
Yes.
And he says, what last?
Because if you're not, then I don't think you should.
Did the topic of you and Chandler moving to Florida, is that like something you talked about a lot?
Yes.
Were you excited about that?
Yes.
Did you tell your family?
Yes.
Did you tell your friends?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked in this case. Exhibit number 507. Can you tell me what that is?
A screenshot of the SpaceX location in Florida.
And was this taken off your phone?
Yes.
Why'd you take that screenshot?
I was curious about the location of the company.
Okay. What's exhibit number 508?
A screenshot from Zillow of homes in Titusville, Florida.
Okay. And it's a screenshot, but there's something else in that screenshot in the top right corner. What is that?
Chandler?
How does this happen? This is on your phone, you're taking a screenshot?
Yes.
Are you FaceTiming at this time?
Yes.
And are you looking up, what are you looking up there?
Homes for sale.
In Titusville, Florida?
Yes.
I'll show you, it's been marked as exhibit 509. What's that?
A pool.
And was this another one of the homes you were looking up?
Yes.
When you took these screenshots, when you were FaceTiming with your boyfriend at the time, did you believe that you were possibly going to be moving to Florida and maybe buying a home or renting an apartment, things of that sort?
Yes.
Fair to say these homes you were looking up weren't cheap either.
No.
Did you think you'd be having some money available to you?
Yes.
All right, I'll move 507, 508, 509 into evidence.
Any objection?
No.
They are received. They may be published.
Just briefly, this is exhibit number 507. I just showed you, this is what we were talking about when we said that you took a screenshot of just where SpaceX was?
Yes.
Okay. Did you know prior to Chandler talking about it that they had a location in Florida?
No.
Okay. Exhibit number 508. We're looking at a $699,000 home in Florida. And you're kind of on the phone with Chandler. And is this what a FaceTime looks like when you're kind of browsing other apps while you're on FaceTime?
Yes.
And so is that Chandler in the top right?
Yes.
Were you talking to him about this at the time?
Yes.
Okay. I'm showing you exhibit 509. Here we're looking at a pool of another home. Is that Chandler in the top right?
Yes.
And same thing, you were talking to him about moving to Florida?
Yes.
What kind of conversations did you personally have? Not what other people said, but what were you telling your family, your mom, your brother about the plan?
Chandler would move down to Florida and start working. I would go at the end of August after my lease ended. And I celebrated my birthday in Madison. And Titusville isn't too far from where Disneyland is. And I was looking at pharmacy schools in Florida as well.
Did you talk to your friends about this plan?
Yes.
Was there any discussion of transportation or cars or things like that once you got down to Florida?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Chandler had a car lined up for when he got down there already, and I was going to drive my car down.
Did you ever invite your friends that were close to you and say, like, hey, you can come down and visit when we're down there?
Yes.
What kind of things did you talk to them about doing?
Going to Disneyland, Universal Studios, going fishing.
I think we saw in one of those prior texts that the SpaceX job was supposed to begin mid-June. Was that your understanding of the timing?
Yes.
Around the time it was supposed to start, did something happen that caused a delay?
Yes.
What happened?
Mitch went to the hospital.
Chandler's brother? Mm-hmm. And he's testified and told everyone kind of about it. But in general, what was your understanding of what was going on?
His sugar levels were very high, and he had to be there for a couple days.
What did Chandler, did he tell you anything about whether that was going to delay SpaceX, or what the relationship between those two things are, Mitchell's illness and SpaceX?
He didn't want to leave while Mitch was ill.
Mitch was in the hospital for a couple days?
Yes.
At that point, did Chandler tell you, or did you know of any time he was supposed to now start SpaceX?
I don't remember.
Okay. Was it delayed?
Yes.
After Mitchell's hospitalization, did anything else happen that caused a delay in SpaceX?
I ended up going to the urgent care as well, and then Chandler fell.
Okay. Chandler was in the hospital.
Yes.
What did you know about Chandler falling?
He was running and slipped down the stairs and then fell pretty hard and hit his head.
Did Chandler talk to you about his injury?
Yes.
What kind of symptoms was he reporting that he was feeling after that fall?
Tingles in his legs, sensitivity to light, severe headaches, weakness.
Was Chandler able to physically do normal things around that time?
No,
What do you mean by that?
he had a hard time lifting things and quite often would get lightheaded.
Could he carry heavy things from what you observed or knew?
No,
Could he drive long distances, things of that sort?
no,
Was he able to travel?
no,
Why do you know that, or why do you say that?
because of the head injury and wearing the neck brace.
I'm going to show you a couple exhibits marked 511. Can you tell me what 511 is?
Chandler in the emergency room.
Okay. And he's kind of got his hat over his head there.
Yes,
Who sent you? Did you see this photo eventually?
yes.
How'd you get that photo?
It was sent to me.
Do you know who sent it to you?
I believe it was Chandler or his mother.
What's 512?
Chandler with Mr. Halderson and Mitch during the Father's Day brunch.
He's wearing the collar there.
Yes,
513, another photo of Chandler in the collar.
yes.
All right, move 511, 12, and 13 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
They are received. They may be published.
Thank you, Judge. Just so we're all looking at the same thing, you said this is a photograph that was sent to you, Chandler, in the hospital, 511? Correct?
Correct.
Sorry, we got to do it twice, kind of, that's how it works. 512, photograph of, that's Chandler on the left side, correct?
Correct.
And then the middle, is that Mr. Halderson?
Correct.
And on the right, is that Mitchell?
Correct.
And that's, where is that photo taken, do you know?
In the living room by the kitchen.
In 513, another photograph of Chandler wearing that neck brace.
Correct.
What were you aware of in terms of like what the prognosis was for his injuries? Like what was going to happen to him or what was going on?
He had a concussion, light sensitivity, and tingling in his legs.
Was it going to get better?
I guess at this point I'm going to object.
I need you to use the microphone.
I'll withdraw the question, the defense object. Did Chandler tell you if he was going to get better or the symptoms were improving around that time?
No,
Was there any discussion about how the concussion and the injury was going to affect SpaceX?
he wouldn't be able to travel down there.
Tell me about anything you remember about that type of discussion.
Can you be more specific, please?
Yeah. What did Chandler specifically tell you about why he couldn't travel?
Because he was wearing the neck brace and he had a concussion, so he shouldn't be flying.
Same question as before about American Family and MATC. Did you ever see anything around Chandler's room, on his phone, any documents, records with the SpaceX or Tesla logo or anything like that?
No,
Talked a little bit about houses and things of that sort. Were you aware at any point if Chandler had rented an apartment?
yes.
And tell me about that.
It was a 2-bedroom apartment, and he put a down payment for it. And there's a little dog park, so I could bring my dog Chewbacca down.
Okay. How did you know about this apartment?
Chandler sent me a link.
Did he tell you whether he was just looking at it or if he had actually rented it?
That he rented it.
Did you yourself see a lease of any sort?
No,
Did you ever sign a lease?
no,
Is your only connection with this apartment is looking at the listing that was sent to you?
correct.
we're going to start talking about events starting on June 30th and kind of all the way through July 8th at this point. And I think I'm going to let some of your messages guide our conversation, so I'm going to be walking back and forth quite a bit. But to show you what's been marked in this case is exhibit number 514. Just briefly, could you just page through that and tell us kind of what dates these text messages are from?
They're all on June 30th.
June 30th of 2021, right?
Correct.
All right. And these are the messages between you and Chandler?
Correct.
I'll move 514 into evidence.
Any objection?
I'll bring up the same objection from the sidebar, but otherwise, no.
All right. And based upon the same ruling, they are received and they may be shown.
I'm going to start showing them, and I'm going to ask for some context because we're picking up, obviously, in the middle of thousands of pages of messages, maybe. But the first message is a message from you. To be honest, it's getting to the point where I want to text your mom directly. What was this about on June 30th, 3:18 in the afternoon?
About him being grounded and not being able to see me or hang out.
What was your understanding at that time of what was going on from Chandler? What did he tell you? He was grounded?
Yes.
Okay. Were you wanting to see him?
Yes.
And what did he tell you about whether he could see you or not?
He couldn't
Because of what?
because I wasn't allowed over.
You communicated with Krista a lot, right?
Yes.
When you say that, was Chandler telling you that, or did you actually hear that from Krista or Bart?
From Chandler.
Okay. And you say, it's getting to the point where I want to text your mom directly. And Chandler says, can you read that for me?
It's fine, B. That'll only piss them off more.
And what does he say?
This weekend will be great.
That weekend was the 4th of July weekend coming up, right?
Correct.
You say, now we're still June 30th, we're about 3:19 in the afternoon. You say, okay. And he says what?
Thanks, though.
And then on June 30th, you send this message next. What does that say?
We're not going to the cabin, right?
So in the realm of messages, where the cabin, the first time the jury's seen that, how did this come up, or what was going on where you sent this message?
I was under the impression that Mr. and Mrs. Halderson were going up to the cabin for the 4th of July weekend.
Was that conversations or like over the phone or in person you'd had with Chandler, or was that?
Over the phone.
Okay. And you ask, we're not going to the cabin, are we? What does Chandler say?
No.
You say, I can ask if we can go to the farm, right?
Correct?
And that ended up coming to fruition. You did that.
Yes.
Okay. You read that last message you sent?
That way we can say my mom can care for you since they have a lot of stuff here that they use for Mike and Papa.
Your mom and Crest testified. Who are Mike and Papa in general, and what did that mean that there was stuff there for them?
Mike is Cress's brother, and Papa is her father. Papa is elderly. He is over 90 years of age. And Mike is wheelchair bound and needs help going to the restroom. And overall, my mom helps take care of them.
Okay. What kind of stuff were you talking about that there was stuff there?
Walkers. If he needed one of those stools that you put over the toilet so an elderly person can sit down and they don't have to squat so low since it's hard for their knees.
Okay. Was it your impression that Chandler would be assisted by some of those things?
No.
Why did you say that? There was stuff there for them?
So we'd be able to hang out since his mom was very concerned about his injury.
The next day, Thursday, July 1st, you worked that day?
Can you repeat the date?
Sure, Thursday, July 1st, so before the 4th of July weekend.
Correct.
You have a normal job, normal type of hours, right?
Correct.
Weekdays.
Correct.
Okay. Hopefully just weekdays, right? Showing you what's been marked is exhibit number 516. And I know it might be in a different form than usual, but in general, do you have an idea of what that is?
Yes.
What is that?
Snapchat messages.
And who are they with?
Chandler.
And Chandler's, to the best you can, I know these are people make up names, but what was Chandler's Snapchat name?
Chazzle Dazzle.
Chazzle Dazzle. And significant parts of this are redacted out. In the course of sending Snapchat, sometimes you send just, in general, people are sending pictures back and forth, and part of what we've done in this case is just redact any photographs that we really thought we could, right?
Correct.
Okay. I kept one on, though, just to prove that's you, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is 516 Snapchat messages between July 1st and July 7th between you and Chandler?
Correct.
All right, I'll move 516 into evidence.
Any objection?
Same objection as the text messages.
Same ruling that it is received, may be published.
I need you to tell us about Snapchat. I don't know what everyone's understanding is. Everyone's of different ages. Some people have a Snapchat, some people don't. Just in general, what is Snapchat?
Snapchat is a social media app where you can send photos with titles, or you can send messages through the chat part of the app.
And what is one of the features of Snapchat that it's primarily known for that text messages maybe aren't?
They aren't generally saved.
They delete, right?
Correct.
Okay. Is there a way to manually save messages or photos on Snapchat?
Yes.
And is it easy or is it hard?
I find it easy.
What do you do?
You hold down the text and you select save.
And if you save the message, if you're communicating right now with Snapchat with one of your friends and they send you a snap, if you click on it and look and do nothing, that message will delete, right?
Sometimes.
Okay. But if you could manually save it, right? By putting your finger down and saving it.
Correct. Or if you change the settings to delete within 24 hours.
Sometimes when you snapped with Chandler, one or both of you would save the messages.
Correct.
And those messages are what we're looking at here, right?
Correct.
Okay. Would you say Snapchat is your primary form of communication with Chandler?
One of them.
Okay. So I'm going to display 516, and we'll start going through some things here in a second. But we talked about, we left one photograph on just to prove that's you, right?
Correct.
Okay. And we'll redact the rest. And when, for obvious reasons, we don't want everything coming out. But on July 1st of 2021 at 7:11, you get a message, right, from Chandler?
Correct.
What does it say?
How do you sleep?
And you say, I slept good. How did you sleep? And how does he respond?
I hardly slept.
Okay. He gives you kind of a emoji face. You say, I'm sorry, B. Why? Can you read Chandler's message back to you after you say why?
I don't know. Stuff hasn't really been going well for me lately, so I'm trying to plan for the next thing to fuck me over.
Okay. After that, Chandler sends another message, and we'll try to get it in the right spot. And can you read that?
Yeah, I just had a great future planned and it's falling apart.
And you say, no, it's not. You're going to be okay. You're reassuring him, right?
Correct.
You respond, you're going to go to Florida. You even said it's probably just the brace, probably just the brace, right?
Correct.
He says, thanks. You say, of course, I love you, and I'm here to keep your booty in check.
Correct.
Now we're up to 7:55 in the morning. Right after you say that, what does Chandler say back to you?
There's a bit of a glare.
Sure.
Thank you. Will you leave me even if it doesn't work? Worded bad, but you understand.
You respond, no, I wouldn't. And he says,
I won't stop trying.
you say, like, Florida would be so dope and, like, nice, but I'm not dating you for money. I love you tons.
Correct.
What does he say?
I love you a ton too. By the way, I'm not giving up. I'm just worried.
You say, don't worry, love. Don't be worried, love. It'll work out.
Correct.
And he says, thank you, B. You say, of course. Now we're up to 8:30. He says, you helped me a ton. Right?
Correct.
Okay. Other than these messages, these Snapchat messages that morning, were you and Chandler communicating by phone or anything else around 7:30 into 8:30 in the morning on July 1st of 2021 that you remember?
I don't remember.
Okay. Now that's a weekday, and I think you said you were working that day.
Correct.
About what time do you go to work?
(8:30) since I was working close.
And if you had to work at 8:30, is that what time you would leave or what time you'd get there?
I have to be clocked in by 8:30.
Okay. What time would you have to leave where you're staying then to get to work by 8:30?
Around 8 o'clock, 8:10.
Okay. When you're at work, I think we all maybe send an occasional message or two, but are you frequently on your phone a lot at work or only when you just have a second?
When I have a minute.
Okay. Do you have a busy job?
I do.
Okay. At some point that day, you and Chandler switch back to texting as well, right?
Correct.
Okay. I'm showing it's been marked in this case as exhibit number 515. Just look at a message. Can you tell me what date these messages are?
July 1st, 2021.
All right. And this appear to be a couple pages of text messages between you two?
Correct.
All right. I'll move 515 into evidence.
Any objection other than the standing objection?
No.
They are received. And they may be published.
All right. Maybe try one more light on, Judge. We'll see if we can't get this.
Don't think that
That's
helps.
worse than ever. Oh, there we go. All right. Can you see that, Kat, or no?
Correct, I can.
Okay. I'm going to try on my end to fix things up a little bit. Starts with just you talking, and eventually there's a message from Chandler on the 1st at 1:02 p.m., and I'll move it down so it's out of the light. But can you tell me what that message says?
Sorry, forgot to tell you, but Mom did okay you hanging out with us all weekend.
Sorry, and I think I said Chandler. I meant you. Right. Did you send that message or did Chandler?
I did.
Okay. Your mom okayed you guys hanging out.
Correct.
Was that at the farm and things like that?
Correct.
Okay. Chandler responds, awesome. And what do you say back to him?
Yeah, so convince your parents hard.
And that was at 1:03 on the 1st. What did you mean by that, convince your parents hard?
I meant to convince his parents to let us hang out.
Why would he need to convince his parents based on what you knew at the time? What was going on?
He wasn't able to hang out around that time.
And then at 1:03, just after that, Chandler sends you a message. What does that say?
I overheard that they might go to the cabin with their friends, but IDK.
So that was kind of following up on the possibility of the cabin from yesterday on the 30th. There it's kind of more conclusive.
Correct.
Okay. What time did you get off work? What time do you get off work generally, or if you know, what time did you get off that day?
5 o'clock.
When you get home that day, do you remember what you did?
I don't remember.
Okay. Did you and Chandler FaceTime a lot?
Yes.
Kind of a weird question, but I have to ask. Did you sometimes FaceTime when you guys were showering?
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes you take screenshots of Chandler.
Yes.
You took a lot of screenshots on your phone, didn't you?
Yes.
Okay. I'm showing you it's been marked in this case as 517. Is that one of those screenshots?
Yes.
Did you take that night, sometime after you got home from work, while FaceTiming with Chandler?
Yes.
Okay. We'll move 517 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
It's not a nude photograph, too, I'll note for the court.
Are you sorry?
It's above the waist.
Oh, understood. It is received, it may be published.
And just briefly, that's kind of the FaceTime setup, but that's Chandler. And the background, does that appear to be the shower at the Halderson home?
Yes.
Okay. They have a big shower in that house.
Yes.
Okay. And it's Chandler looking into his phone and you snap the screenshot.
Pardon?
You snap that screenshot?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have any plans to hang out with Chandler that night as far as you remember?
Not that night.
Okay. But you were communicating a lot?
Correct.
Okay. Later that night, at some point, Judge, if you could turn the lights on just briefly for the witness. Here's some additional messages. Around 8:30 at night, Chandler sends you a couple of messages. Could you there's one with an emoji, but could you read out the two that have text?
Baby, I need you.
Baby, I need you.
Yes.
Did you know what that was in reference to?
I don't recall.
And later, there's discussion of him looking at your Snapchat location and wondering where you were.
Correct.
Okay. And I think I said 8, but it's in military time, so that would be 6:30-ish or so. Okay.
Which exhibit were those in, counsel?
Sure. I was referencing Exhibit 516.
Thank you.
So around 6:30 or so, when Chandler sends you the message, baby, I need you, do you recall talking to him after that, verbally, on the phone?
I don't recall.
Now, I think I mentioned something about Snapchat locations. Does another feature of Snapchat have anything to do with your location?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, is there a location feature on Snapchat with your friends that you can look at their location?
Correct, yes.
Can you tell us about that?
You can select certain friends to view your location, or anyone who is on your friends list can view it.
In your and Chandler's relationship, was that something you did with each other?
Correct.
And was it reciprocal? Both of you did that?
Correct.
When this was going on during your relationship, was it your intention that anytime you'd open Snapchat, you'd, in theory, be able to see exactly where he was?
Correct.
And him the same for you?
Correct.
Okay. Were you aware at all of what Chandler's plans were the night of the first, when you were either FaceTiming while he was in the shower or any conversation? He talk at all about what he was doing that night?
That he would be taking care of the dogs and was gonna make dinner.
Did he mention, or do you recall if he said anything about where his parents were on that day?
He said they were doing a grocery pickup.
Okay,
May I have a break?
you may.
This is a good time to take a break. I think we can, we're approaching, I try to do them every 90 minutes, and we're pretty close to that. And sometimes the after lunch break can come a little bit earlier and be wise. So let's take 10 minutes, both for the jury and for the witness and the parties. Randy?
All right for the jury?
You're free to leave the witness stand, leave the courtroom. You just can't talk to anybody about your testimony while we're on the break, and we'll take 10 minutes and reassemble. Thank you. Because I don't know how hard, I don't know if it's hard for them to see when what's called the wall wash is on, which is how we started before. And then when I turn that